Hey everyone, welcome to week 3 of Tea with EC, chatting about folklore. As you know, if you caught the video last week, we're chatting about mermaids again this week because there's such a breadth of folklore to discuss and discover about mermaids. So last week we had a bit of a chat about where would you find a mermaid, what do they look like in case you hadn't worked that one out, so how would you identify one, and whether or not they're dangerous. Obviously, since this is the Adventurer's Guide to Surviving the Folklore Wilderness, not just encountering it. This week we're going to have a bit of a look at the potential benevolence and helpfulness of mermaids in certain circumstances. So how would you know if a mermaid is likely to help you? Look, short answer, you wouldn't. Best bet is to stay away from her. But if you've helped her, you do have a better chance, as we'll see in our stories. We're going to do a bit of a case study of 2.5 stories to understand the benevolence of mermaids today. Some mermaids might help you even if you haven't done them a good turn. In particular, mermaids, like other creatures from the waters, the selkies, the lake maidens, are known for their medicinal knowledge. In particular, their knowledge of herbs, which is quite interesting for a creature that lives where herbs don't grow. They've been known to come up out of the water to offer advice to people who are caring for young women with consumption or tuberculosis around using nettles and mugwort to cure it. So, stories today, 2.5 stories, because one of them is really a version of one of the others. Although it's such a charming story that I decided to include it anyway. So our first story is quite well known. It's called Lootie and the Mermaid. Now, Lootie was a Cornish fisherman and wrecker, and he lived at Lizard Point at the southern tip of the UK. And he lived in a house on a cliff above the waters with his wife and his children. And every day he'd go down to the beach for his work. And one day while he was down on the beach, he came across a mermaid. And the mermaid had been stranded in a rock pool by the receding tide. So she asked Lootie if he would carry her back to the sea. And Lootie, being a good guy, was like, yep, absolutely. And so as he carried her down, the mermaid said to him, I'll reward you with 3 wishes. Now, Lootie was good. He wished for unselfish things that would help other people. So he wished for the power to break the spells of witchcraft, the power to compel familiar spirits to do good, and that these powers would continue down his line. And because the mermaid had wished for unselfish things, because Lootie had wished for unselfish things, the mermaid said to him that she would give him the comb out of her hair, with which he could comb the sea in order to call her if he had need of her. And she also promised that no harm would come to his family. But as they grew closer to the water, the other side of the mermaid's nature began to assert itself, and the mermaid tried to allure Lootie into the water with her. And her allurement was so strong that Lootie would have gone into the water if it wasn't for his dog, which was howling on the shore. And when Lootie turned to look back at it, he saw on the cliff top the house where he lived with his family. And that was enough to bring him back to his senses and make him tell the mermaid, actually, I'm not getting in the water with you. But by this point, they were quite deep into the water, and the mermaid tried to draw Lootie in by force. And he was forced to brandish his knife at her, and the cold iron was enough to repel her, and she leapt back into the water. But as she leapt in, she said to him, farewell, my sweet, for 9 long years, and then I'll come for you, my love. And sure enough, 9 years later, as Lootie was out on the water with one of his sons, the mermaid popped up out of the water and called to him. And he said, my hour has come. And he dived out of the boat and was never seen again. And so strong was the mermaid's call that it is said that every 9 years, one of Lootie's descendants is lost to the sea. But the mermaid was as good as her word, and the powers that Lootie had asked for did continue down the generations in his family, and his descendants were known for their healing abilities. So the second story, similar to Lootie, but with a much more benevolent and less dangerous mermaid, is the Old Man of Curie. I hope it's pronounced Curie. If it's not, someone let me know. So the Old Man of Curie was walking on the beach one day when he thought he saw a girl up on the rock ahead fall off the rock and into the water. So he raced over to try and help her, but when he got there, he realized it wasn't a human girl at all. It was a mermaid girl, and she had been stranded by the receding tide and asked for his help to get her back down. So the old man put her onto his back and he carried her across the long sands down to the water. And because he had helped her, the mermaid offered him the traditional 3 wishes. And the old man said he had no need of money or gold, but he would like to be able to help other people. And so he asked for the powers to break spells, to discover thefts, and to cure illnesses. And the mermaid said absolutely, but these skills don't come by magic. What he would have to do is come back to the rock where he had found her at high tide on nights with a bright moon, and she would teach him. And so she gave him her comb so that he could comb the water to call her on nights when he was able to come and learn. And she was as good as her word, and he learnt many things that he put to good use. And in return, sometimes he would take her on his back and carry her through the town so that she could see the strange sights of the land people, which, as we'll see from our next story today, is actually pretty brave of the mermaid. And it's said that some measure of the skill that the mermaid taught the old man, as well as the comb itself, stayed in the old man's family for a few generations. So our final story of mermaid benevolence is mermaid benevolence towards the Selkies, and it explains the obligation and duty that Selkies have towards mermaids. Once upon a time in the Shetland Isles, some seal hunters were out, and a seal hunter took the skin of a seal and threw the body back into the water. But unbeknownst to him, the seal was a Selkie man, and he was only unconscious, and he woke up in the water and somehow managed to struggle, cold and miserable, deep down underwater into a cave where there lived a mermaid. And the mermaid could see that clearly the only way to help the Selkie man was to help him get his skin back. And the only way she could think of to do that was to let herself be caught by the hunters so that she could beg for the skin. So she let herself be drawn up in the nets of the boat, and she told the hunters her story and begged for the skin back. And the man who had thrown the seal back into the water was full of remorse and wanted to return it to her, but his friends were really greedy, and they decided that not only would they sell the skin on land, they would also sell the mermaid. And so they left her tangled up in the net on the seal skin on the bottom of the boat. Now this mermaid, unlike many other mermaids and more like one of the Azrai, which we'll discuss another week, couldn't survive long in the upper air. And so as the boat travelled back towards the shore, she felt herself fading. And her only hope was that her death, as it does with many mermaids, would release a storm that would be big enough to sink the ship and send the seal skin floating back down to the cave. And this did happen. As the mermaid died, a storm came up, the ship was sunk, the men were lost, and the seal skin and the mermaid's body washed back down to the cave so that the Selkie could draw back on his skin and could know the great debt that he and his people owed to the mermaid. Dark one. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to check my website on Sunday for all these stories written up and more information about mermaids as part of our adventurous guide. There'll also be an illustration of the Old Man of Curie, and I'll put links on social media, of course, on Sunday. Thanks, everyone. See ya.